So now we added those 4 pages. It's now time to start filling them with some life, and it's of course up to you with which page you want to start. Now I'll start very classic with the starting page, with the home page here, and I'll start populating that page. And on this home page, I want to do 2 things. I want to output 2 things. The first thing that should be rendered is like a hero section. And that's just how we typically call that. It's this welcome section where we present our main product, or in the case of a blog, maybe ourselves. So that's this hero section where we present ourselves. And then the second part is the featured posts section. Now we have no posts yet, but we can still start working on that and just output some dummy content for the moment, and we'll then replace the dummy content with actual posts once we have some. So these are the 2 kinds of things I want to output here, and therefore in the component where we return JSX, I want to have 2 main sections that will be output here. Now I want to keep my page component relatively lean and not put too much markup in here. I also don't want to add a styling file for the page component. That is something you don't have to do, but something you will often see. That page components are relatively lean, focus on getting data with getStaticProps if they need to, something we will add later, and don't do too much regarding styling or HTML. Instead, we use separate React components for that, and we then just use those separate React components here. So in the homepage component, we could want to output a hero component side by side to a featured posts component. And of course, we would need to wrap this with a fragment. So with this fragment component provided by React, since we're not allowed to have adjacent JSX elements otherwise. Now, of course, such a hero and featured posts component doesn't exist yet, and hence it's now our job to create it. And therefore, I'll add a brand new components folder on the root project level, so side by side to the pages folder. And the goal of this folder is to store all the individual components that will be used in this project. And in here, I'll add a new folder, the home page folder, because I want to store the home page specific components in there. You can, of course, name this folder however you want though. But I'll create that home page folder in the components folder, and inside of that home page folder, I'll add 2 components, the hero component and this featured posts component. Now, both components will also need some styling. And since this is still no CSS course, and I don't want to bore you with writing CSS styles, you find styling files attached. Attached you find 2 CSS files, featured posts.module.css and hero module.css, and you should just download those 2 CSS files and add them in that homepage folder in the components folder side by side to these 2 JavaScript files, because we're going to use these styles. Now, of course, you are free to bring your own styles and tweak everything in the way you want. These are just some basic styles which we can use so that we don't have to write our own styles. Now, one important word about those styles though, in those files, I'm using a feature called CSS variables. I'm extracting certain values like colors, but also sizes and dimensions from CSS variables. And these CSS variables are defined in the globals CSS file, which I gave you right from the start, so which was part of the starting project you found in the last lectures. And the interesting thing about CS modules is that we now have one place where we can define and manage our colors and our sizes. And when we change it here, it will affect the entire application. Now, this is totally independent from Next.js, This is a default CSS feature. I'm just using it here, and I want to make you aware of that in case you look into my CSS files and wonder what these strange things are. Now that means that of course you can also easily tweak your dimensions and colors by simply changing the values in the globals CSS file. But with that out of the way, let's go to the hero.js file and let's start working on that, and let's build that hero component.